Good morning. Good morning. Everybody hear me? Is this loud? Okay. Thanks for having me here. I have about a half hour, 35 minutes, I was told by your pastor to talk to you, which is actually short for me to talk, if you know me at all. I usually start when I speak anywhere in schools or anything with, I come from Crystal Beach. Now, if I'm not down here in the Niagara region, I just get a blank stare, because nobody knows what Crystal Beach is. And I say I'm a Shirk, because my mom's name's Joan Shirk. But considering the day it is today, I'm actually a Wilhelm. My grandpa's name was John Wilhelm, and grandpa's name is the last name on the cenotaph in Fort Erie. He gave his life in the Second World War. So I never met my grandpa. And what happened back then, there's a lot of gray hair here. What happened back then was the kids were split up after, because normally the mom couldn't take care of them, and they went to different farms. And my mom went to Erie Shirk, and Erie Shirk adopted my mom. And so that's my mom became Joan Shirk, and she was Joan Wilhelm. And then my mom took her brothers and sisters and got them all into the Shirk home over the next few years. Crystal Beach was a very nice place to grow up. We had a saying back then when I went to Ridgeway Public School, the boys and girls who walked down to school were Ridgeway, the ones who walked up were Crystal Beach. That was the dividing line of who. So I grew up on that beach playing in the sand with my cousin Carrie Wilhelm and going to the amusement park and roller skating at the Alley Cat. When I was about 11 years old, my dad moved to Niagara Falls, and that was this big change in my life. I came into school, Orchard Park, by Rolling Acres. Rolling Acres was just being developed in Niagara Falls, and I came in halfway through the school year. I'm the second oldest boy, which has its own issues, and I'm also ADHD dyslexic. But ADHD dyslexic was not defined back in my day. The term I think my dad used was a nut bar. I was a little nut bar. I could not stop, right? And I would say things wrong, and I would read things wrong. And so here I am, a new kid in Orchard Park School in grade 6, and I was the bullied kid. I was the kid who was different. I was the kid who was very hypersensitive, and everything hurt me. And in grade 6, grade 7, and grade 8, I was bullied. And I sometimes think if I could ever go back and change anything, I would change that. That when I was in the schoolyard and I was getting beat up and put in scissors and made to say uncle, when that was happening, that my schoolmates would stand up for me. But they didn't. Better me than them. Back then, when you didn't do well in school, they kept you back a year. So in grade 6, we had 2 boys that were really grade 7 boys. They'd been kept back a year. I'm 62 years old. I can tell you their first and last names and show you the house they lived in. That's how impactful that bullying was to me. So in grade 6, grade 7, grade 8, if somebody asked what Rick was like, Rick was very quiet. He didn't do well in school. After school, I would come home and I'd get on my mini bike or my dirt bike, and I would go to the sand pit, the quarry on the end of St. Paul, and ride till it was dark and come home. I had no friends. And so what I'd done is I'd actually done the worst type of bullying to myself, exclusionary bullying. If I didn't go to sports, the bullies didn't see me. If I did go to after-school programs, the bullies didn't see me, and I did get beaten up. In grade 8, I wanted to learn how to play the trumpet, because there was this thing out there called the Tijuana Brass, and they were really good. I really heard Albert, and I really liked that trumpet playing, and so I wanted to learn how to play the trumpet. So I went to Prince Philip's School after school to be in the band, and the bullies were there. So I waited outside till the bullies were gone, and I went in, and by the time I went in, the only thing left was the E-flat horn and the triangle. So I took the E-flat horn, because even though it's not cool, I'll still learn how to play the trumpet. And I went outside, and the bullies were there, and they beat me up, and they smashed my horn on the ground. So the next day, I said, I fell off my bicycle, the chain broke, and here's your broken horn, and that explains my black eyes. If you think, how come I didn't tell my father, how come I didn't tell my family, back then was a different time. There was 5 of us kids. My dad had to work. And I thought, I need to be more of a man. I need to suck this up. I need to learn learn how to fight, I need to get stronger. Meanwhile, I didn't. I needed to share, and I wasn't. So by grade 8, I was very damaged, even though I didn't know. In grade 9, I started at A and Meyer, and the catchment area for the high school split on Dorchester Road, and the bullies were going to Stamford Green. I thought, this is perfect. I'm going to self-actualize, even though I didn't know that word. Life is going to be good. And I walked towards high school. It's 1970, and about 2 blocks from the high school, I saw the coolest guy I've ever seen in my life. Think Davy Jones from the Monkees. He was 5'6", 5'7", handsome guy, long hair, Fu Manchu mustache, bell-bottoms, platform shoes, Nehru shirt with gold buttons down the front, and a white belt with holes all the way around. He was the epitome of cool. He was working on a Burgess sports car under a carport. I had short hair. I couldn't grow a mustache or held a gun to my head. My mom bought my clothes. And when I got close to him, I said, nice car. He was working on an Austin Healey British sports car. And he said, you like cars? And I said, I love cars. And Billy became my friend. I couldn't wait to see Billy on the way to school, on the way home, tell him about my day. I just wanted to be Billy. Billy was 21 years old. I was 14. I never told my mom about Billy because that's too big of an age difference. And my mom wouldn't let me see Billy. But I wasn't doing anything wrong. The first week of October, the week before I turned 15, I'm coming home from school, and Billy's got his car running on the side of the road. And he said, Rick, do you want to go for a ride? I'm a 14-year-old boy. The worst thing I could think of in my mind, if I was late getting home because my mom was a stay-at-home mom, I would get yelled at by my mom. If somebody would have told me that Billy, my friend Billy, is a junkie, I would not know what the word meant. I would have thought he collected junk. I had never heard the term. And I went for a ride with Billy. He had a different agenda. He was a heroin addict. Him and his junkie partner like to watch Virgin, somebody who's never done drugs before, get high. The nicest thing I can say about that is they relived their initial high by watching somebody else have their initial high. And they took me to Main and Ferry, pulled in an alleyway there across from the Maple Leaf. The Maple Leaf's still there, and the alleyway's still there at Main and Ferry in Niagara Falls. And he showed off his car, and I thought this was so cool, walking with this cool guy. And we went up the stairs to a little apartment over Main Street on the corner, and there was a scary man in there. And I sat in a chair by the door, and I thought my friend Billy will take me out of here. And out came syringes, out came baggies, out came spoons, out came pieces of cotton. And they made up a combination of methamphetamine and heroin. It's called a speedball. It's the most dangerous combination of drugs you can do, bar none. And I thought this had nothing to do with me. It had everything to do with me. And they held my arm and they injected me. I overdosed. I went unconscious. I woke up with shredded newspapers and magazines and books on the ground where I was laying. I was convulsing on the ground. Just to tell you how mean these guys were, they were shooting up drugs and squirting the bloody water from their syringes on me. That's what brought me. I came to. When I came to, I got up and ran out of there and ran to the police station on Queen Street, the old police station, which isn't that far away. On the way there, the thinking that I had for the last 2.5 years of that this is my fault, that I made this mistake, that I'm the one who didn't tell my mom about Billy, I'm the one who went for a ride without asking. I didn't go to the police station. I stayed at a hostel down the street and paid $1 on Bridge Street. And so I went laid on a cot in this open area and went unconscious from the heroin and woke up being assaulted and fought off the assault. The next night I sat out on Lundy's Lane with my hoodie up and a brick next to me. Sometimes if you wonder why kids don't go to a structured facility when it's cold outside, why they sleep on the street, maybe something's happened when they've been in that facility. By the way, you know the Flying Saucer restaurant on Lundy's Lane? That was the end of Lundy's Lane back in 1970. There was this field still on Hillman. And so I was out there. 2 working girls came and found me and wanted to figure out what was wrong with me. Why was I laying in an alleyway? And they took me to their motel room and tried to figure out what was wrong with me, why I was shaking, why I was vomiting. And they went and got a cap of heroin and split the cap of heroin with me. I snorted it, and that quickly I was a heroin addict. I set myself up with the 2 years of my internal dialogue. And now I had this drug going through my body. I could not live with what I had done to my family in my brain, and so I started chasing the dragon, we called him. And so my dad found me and brought me home, but I'd lost my ability to say what I had done. And so I just cried and said I was sorry. And when he went to sleep that night, I left. And so at 15 years old, I was on the street, and opportunistic criminal. Most young people on the street are opportunistic criminals. They walk past a car, they see a wallet, they break the window, that kind of thing. 15 was very dangerous for me. Back then, Vietnam was where most of the heroin was coming from, the Middle East conflict at the time, and our soldiers were using quinine to cut it. Quinine is what you have to stop you getting malaria and different diseases when you're over there, and it also takes your appendix out. So my appendix ruptured. But when my appendix ruptured, I had already overdosed once. And when I'd overdosed once, they put me in the psych wing for 3 days because they considered addiction to be a deviance back then. And so when my appendix ruptured, I couldn't go into pediatrics because I was a junkie, and they kept me in a hallway. And so I laid in a hallway for a couple of weeks while my body healed. And then I went out on the street, and then I got shot in Niagara Falls, New York. And now I got shot in my left bicep, and the bullet stuck in my bone and broke it. And so now I'm running around with a cast like this, with a stick. I can't get through doors, and I'm running around like that. And then I overdosed again, and they put me in the psych wing for 5 days. And then I overdosed again, and they put me in the psych wing for 30 days and did drug treatment on me. Drug treatment in 1971 was electroshock therapy. When I came out of the treatment at that point, I now feared Canada because of what was happening to me in the Niagara region. So I crossed the border and went to Florida. If you screw up in Florida, you wake up bandy on the beach, not frozen in a ditch. Right? And so Florida, it was 1971, Miami Democratic conventions were going on down there, and I thought it'll be fine, I'll just be another hippie, you know. I got a job working I just need to pause here. I have an older brother. So when I grew up, I had an older brother. And my older brother's name is Phil. And he never did anything wrong. And I was the little nutbar. And so my nickname for Phil was Perfect Phil. Perfect Phil never does anything wrong. When I was 15 years old and I'm crossing the border, I'm almost 16, I stole Perfect Phil's girlfriend's car and drove to Florida. No license, no ID at all. I've never had a job, and I drove to Florida. I forged the ownership and bought a 450 Honda Scrambler. And I got a job working the beach from Miami to Hollywood. It's about 15 miles of beach. And it was guys like me, and at night you police the beach, and it was great. And I was a heroin addict, but Mexican heroin is $7 a gram, so that was fine. I lived in a little trailer park in Hollywood. And I thought I was doing good. I'm 16, I'm an adult, I can live by myself, I can control my addiction, so I'm going to be fine. And a guy got me that worked on the beach. He gave me a ride one night, he attacked me, he hurt me very badly. I almost died. When I was in ICU, they had a police on the other side of the wall, and I was having surgeries to fix my body, and I said to a nurse, how come that cop's there? And she said, because you're a juvenile. And I said, I'm 16 years old. And she said, no, an adult is 17 in Florida. So that guy was there because I was a juvenile. He never did come in. Eventually 2 detectives came in, 2 fat guys in suits with briefcases. And they came in and said, what happened to you? And I said, I was hitchhiking and a guy picked me up and attacked me. And they said, because you lied to police. I'd been on the street a year. The first thing I learned was don't snitch, don't rat. You do not talk to police. And so I lied. I knew who attacked me. I worked with him on the beach. I know where he lives. I know what he drives. But you don't talk to police. Police pulled out mugshots and said, is this the guy? Because police know who's on their street. And the 5th one they pulled out or so was the mugshot of the guy that we thought was so cool that would give us rides in his car and smoke weed with us. And underneath it said, rapist killer, life sentence, Jacksonville State Prison, on parole after serving 15 years. And I said no, because you don't talk to police. Eventually those detectives came back at night and put handcuffs on me, put baggy pants on me and a hospital smock and took me. And I thought, they're going to go kill me. And they flew me in an airplane in the dark and went bare feet on me. And when we got to this airport, I said, can you take the handcuffs off so I can go to the washroom? And they said yes, and waited outside the washroom. And then about a half hour later, they caught me a mile down the road running in the ditch. And I thought they're just now going to kill me. And then they said, Bill said, don't put shoes on him. He's a runner. Bill's my dad. And so I realized they were taking me to my dad. So they took me to Fort Erie, to Buffalo, and my dad came across the border, and he brought Canadian ID, and he paid them $4,000. $4,000 in Canadian money. Canadian money was worth more than American money back then. That was 1 year's salary for those police to bring me to the border. And so I crossed the border with my dad. When we got to the Canadian side, I said, pull over, and I got up and walked away. I now changed my narrative. I'm an only child. My dad died in Vietnam. My mom lives in Mattadale, New York, because I could not have family. If you're my sister, we have your sister. I knew I was going to go into a world. I was too badly damaged. I hitchhiked to Niagara Falls, scored some heroin at a little junkie place on Huron Street, went upstairs to the washroom. Nobody's ever going to know about Florida. It's cemented in my mind, but nobody will know about it. And I got high and picked a razor blade up off the counter and cut my right bicep. I'm now a cutter. So I cut my body for the next 20 years, every 20 to 30 days. So I didn't know what cutting was. I had a great education. I did not know about affective disorders. I just knew I needed to hurt somebody. And so I would hurt myself. And by the way, I'm covered in tattoos. I have 480-something tattoos, or one, kind of depends how you look at things. And that was also cutting. I quickly realized I could put a tattoo on my body. By the way, for you young people, they're not licked on by kittens, right? They hurt. That's a lot of needles. It would put pain into my body, but it would have the secondary effect of making me look scarier to other men, because I now feared men. And when I say I feared men, I mean PTSD, shaking uncontrollably, pee myself, fear men. I cannot trust men, and I cannot trust my judgment of men. Who I think is cool is who hurts me. So I cannot go near men. And where am I going to get my heroin? And I remember going to a Salvation Army store with $1 and buying a set of sheep shears, great big scissors, taking them apart and taping up the handle on one of them, and jumping a junkie drug dealer that night and holding it to his throat and threatening him with death and taking his heroin. I became a rip-off artist. Very dangerous way to live. You rob other drug dealers. So you come out at night and go in the daytime. I did that for a little bit, and then I robbed a Satan's Choice motorcycle club down here in the Niagara region. If you want to have a good life, don't rob bikers. Little thing you might want to jot down. So here I am now, hiding from Garnet McEwen, mother, the boss of the Satan's Choice. And eventually I'm dragged into an alleyway by Garnet. Garnet was 6'5", 450 pounds. When he put me under his arm, I didn't touch the ground on either side. I thought, I'm going in his trunk, and I'm going in the Welland Canal. That's what they would do with guys. They would crack their heads off the Welland Canal and throw them in the water. Death by misadventure. And he put me on the back of his motorcycle and took me home. I became what's called a kid, not a derogatory term. It's spelled K-I-D-D. It's a young guy being brought into the bike gang. And so I lived with Mother at his house as he taught me how to rob and how to carry weapons and how to shoot. And back then they had milk boxes. You remember those? You got your milk delivered in them. And he would put me in houses and he would squeeze me through the milk box and throw the gun in afterwards. And then when I was finished with the men in there, I would open the door. By 19, I was one of Canada's most dangerous men. That was a designation meant by guns and gangs in Toronto, robbery, homicide. For the next 2 years, they looked for me. They couldn't find me. I was all over Canada. I had a place in British Columbia, I had a place in Winnipeg, and I had a place in Northern Toronto, Richmond Hill. And I moved with the Satan's Choice, and I ran drugs, and I hurt men. And at 21, I got arrested, /rescued, because I think that was the end of my life. I don't think you would live more than 5 years living like that. And I went to prison. And I can't tell, since we're going to, this is how big my cell was in prison. My elbows touched the wall. The bed hooked up against the wall and came down on chains. If it was down, you had to walk over it to get to the bars at the front. Anybody seen Shawshank Redemption? That movie? You'll know the bars, the tiers, the dome, and I was on the second tier, and a little army blanket. If you want a pillow, roll your shoes up in your towel. There's no such thing as a pillow. Open toilet at the end. And I remember the first night in prison, the doors locked and I was safe. I was in my cell. 21 years old, shaved head, sitting in my cell. And the lights went out on the range, the lights went out in the yard, and the biggest sewer rat I've ever seen in my life climbed out of my toilet, shook itself off, looked around my cell for something to eat, squeezed through the bars, and went up and down the range. I spent my first night in prison not sleeping, staring at the toilet. How there's no lid, how did that happen? Are there more? You know. And the next day, I don't want to tell anybody that it happened because rat is a nickname for an informant. And so I don't want that linked to my name. And so the second day I meet my first friend in prison, and I say to him at the end of the second night, the same thing that happened the first night happened the second night. Inmate brought a big cart of books in, and everybody stood in line, all the inmates stood in line and took some books and went to their cell. And I remember the first night thinking, I'm cool, I don't read, you know. And the second night, I say to my friends, what's with the books? And he goes, oh yeah, you stand in line, get some books, put them on top of your toilet, so the rats don't come into your cell at night. So just so you know, I'm an idiot. That started my love of reading. When I was in school, you used to have to read. It was your turn. And because I was dyslexic, I would say things wrong. And I did yesterday with my dog. I do it all the time. And so they would make fun of me, but in my cell, I could read. And I would disappear into the stories. And I became a prolific reader. And I'm just going to do this. And I did 15 years. And at the end of 15 years, I got out because I was a youth when I went in, and I was allowed to come out after 15 years. I wasn't ready to come out. I'd escaped from Collins Bay. I'd escaped from Joyceville. They used to have a nickname for me, and they would write it on my books, SB. And I didn't know why they would write SB on when they would transfer me. And excuse me for this, but one time I said to a guard, why do you write SB on the top of everything? And he says, oh, that's our term for you, sneaky bastard. So this is what they called me in prison. So after 15 years, I got out. Now I'm the enforcer of the mother chapter of the Outlaw Motorcycle Club. I thought I would get out to St. Catharines, and I would get a girlfriend, I would get a job, life would be okay. 2 weeks after I got out, I got shot. I got away from that shooting. I crashed my vehicle, but I got away. 3 weeks later, I got shot twice on Church Street in St. Catharines. I had a bulletproof vest on, but it still breaks your ribs. It's not like TV. I crashed my motorcycle. I got caught with my heroin, my gun, and my bulletproof vest. Got 4 years and 10 months added onto my sentence and went back to prison. I lasted 5 weeks. I couldn't have been more ashamed if I had a dog calling on me when I came back in, you know. And when I came back in, I decided, you know what, I can't function in the real world. I'm a danger. My mom went to a motel when I came near her part of the city because she was so afraid of what was behind me, which she should have been. And I decided when I went back to prison that I would take my own life. I had 4.5 grams of tar heroin inside my body. It's how I carried my heroin. And so I'm fine for my 60-day lockdown when I go into prison. And I thought I'll just take my life. I'll swallow the heroin. There was an old book there. I'll read the book and I'll be gone. And my dad's voice came to me like he was standing behind me. And my dad was a military guy. He'd been in Vietnam. And he had this thing he would say when he tried to rescue me, if it's all lost. It's a military term. And here's my dad's voice behind me going, if it's all lost, ask God. And a Christian man. And I thought, what could God do with me? But it was my dad. It was the man who came to the border. The only man in the world I'll listen to. And by the way, I'd done 15 years in prison. I did 35 moves across Canada during my time in prison. They moved me all the time because I escaped. And I've never heard voices. I wouldn't mind in the company. You know, it gets boring. So here I am, hearing a voice. And so that was unusual. And I thought, what could God do with me? But I remember when I used to go to solitary, when you fight in prison, you get 30 days in the hole. 2 slices of bread during the day, a cup of water, and you're in there for 20 days. It's a raised concrete platform. The reason they call it the hole is because they take the toilet out, because we would just put toilet paper in and flood it and flood the range, and there's a hole in the floor. And I remember going in there, and you know what was in there all the time? Gideon's New Testament. The guards who operated solitary confinement in prisons were Christians. And so I read the Gideon's New Testament under the crack of the door 100 times. Right? I liked the stories of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. I liked, in prison, you hear rumors all the time, and you wait for somebody to come in that witnessed what you're hearing about. And you'd sit, and you'd ask them questions, and they'd tell you about it. So I knew the truth when I read the truth. I knew the truth when I heard the truth. And so here I am in a cell, but I know the New Testament. It's in my head. And so I thought, what could God do with me? But I remember the guy on the cross next to Jesus. So here was my prayer to God. Let me die like a man in the yard when it's my turn. Let me go to heaven on grace like the guy on the cross next to you. And I flushed my drugs down the toilet and went heroin sick, called junk sick, right? And here's what, so that, by the way, is the end of the bad part of my life. So what happened was, about 3.5 weeks later, a lawyer came from Queen's University, and I went into a room, and a glass room where your lawyer comes. It's heavy, super maximum security. I'm in special handling, the highest security in Canada. And I sat with this lawyer. And he said, how are you doing, Ozzy? And I said, fine. And he goes, how much time did you just get? And I said, 4 years, 10 months. He goes, what's your sentence up to? And I go, 39 years, a little more than 39 years. He goes, you're not over 40? And I go, no. And he goes, do you need my help? Can I do anything for you? And I hadn't had a good laugh in a while. That was funny. I am bolted to the floor. And he's saying, can you do anything for me? So I thought that was funny, and I laughed. And I said to him, I quit drugs. I'd like to go to drug treatment. And he said, you can't go to drug treatment from Supermax. And I said, I know. And he went afterwards and spent 3.5 hours with his best friend, the warden, and said, there's something different in Rick's eyes. And on his say-so, they sent me to medium security for 10 days and sent me to drug treatment for a year. And I never did drugs again, and I never cut again. Beautiful, pregnant psychologist who would see me twice a week. And she healed me non-verbally. She got me to write to her, and she would put it in her pocket and talk to me about the Blue Jays. It was the 90s. and then she would ask me, could I have another one? Could I have another one? And she healed me non-verbally. When I went back to prison, my biggest problem was my friends, my club. They're the ones who tried to attack me now because I'm a Christian guy. Right? And so here I am back in prison, and I am happy. I would tell people I'm God's favorite. I would introduce myself as God's favorite. Right? And it's true, I am God's favorite. But what's also true is so is everybody else. Right? And so in prison, you can imagine, here I am, we call prison the belly of the beast. Because the most dangerous men in the world are in there. Right? It's a very, very dangerous place. And I used to, what's a good way to read your Bible? Like your life depends on it. And so here I am reading the Bible going, I gotta have something here, right? And I found Ephesians, the body armor, right? And so I chose a Bible verse that would be my sword, right? And it was Philippians 4:13, because I have no strength. The best I could do was get myself in a prison cell. I was a junkie, I was a cutter, I was a full-on gang member in a warring club. I had 15 years in, I had 20-something more to go. I'm never going to survive. The guys that are as deep into the gang as I am don't survive. You don't get to walk out of that. And so here I am in prison, but I'm not. I'm a Christian. I'm walking with God. I have peace in the same place where I didn't. But I'm uneducated. I have a grade 8. I'll never get married. I'll never have children. Thankfully, that I didn't have children. They didn't have a dad as a monster sitting in prison. And so here I'm in prison knowing I'm not going to survive this, but this is good enough. This is fine, right? And one day they came in from Queen's University, And we got brought down. I was part of the committee, 10 guys that are voted in, and we represent. And usually it's Queen's University or Royal Military College or OH Teaching Psychiatric Hospital or politicians that come in to talk to us. And so I go down there, and in walks two beautiful young women, second-year deviant sociology students, I found out. 9 other guys get up and go, girls, right? And go talk to them. And through the door behind them came the most decrepit old man I've ever seen in my life. One arm didn't work, one leg didn't work, his hair was combed with a stick, he had a beard as long as it was nicotine stained, had a pea stain happening on his pants, and vest was buttoned up wrong. He had bullet wounds on his forehead and neck. I have bullet wounds all over me, I know what they look like. And so I went over to him and I said, are you an old soldier? And he said, yes, sniper, Belgian resistance. And I talked to him for the next 2 hours and he answered every one of my questions. You know how many times my dad talked to me about Vietnam? 0. Never once talked to me about it, right? My grandpa, I didn't know. This guy told me everything. At the end, we're ready to go. And he looks at me and he goes, you seem like a really smart guy, Rick. How come you don't have a university degree? And so I looked at him and went, we're in prison in case you didn't notice. You know? I have a grade in education. Back then in prison, the farthest you could go was grade 10. Frontier College and tutoring would come in and take you to grade 10. They just really needed a grade 8 in prison. And I said to him, I'm not very smart. I have a lot of learning disabilities. And he said, I'll work with you. I'll help you get a GED. And together we'll challenge Queen's University. And you'll do a degree in my department. And when you graduate, I'll have your Queen's ring waiting for you. And he shows me his Queen's ring. And when he walked out the barrier, I thought, that's the most senile guy I've ever met in my life. And the next day he showed up, and I had to show all my paperwork, and he jumped into my life. That old man jumped into my life like I was his son. You know, prodigal son, right? And he spent almost every day with me for the next 3 years. And guess what? I was smart. I didn't know I was smart. I didn't know how to study, and he taught me. 3.5 years later, I became the 17th person in Canadian history to get a university degree from inside a penitentiary. I got a psych degree from Queen's. The first thing I used my psych degree for was to talk to the guards and letting me go graduate at Queen's, right? It's called reverse psychology. It works really good, and make them look good. And so I got to go out to Queen's. So you can imagine, I'm 62 years old and I'm still 220 pounds. I was 250 pounds. I had tattoos on me that all hell's angels must die, tattooed on the back of my hand. You know, and here I am going to Queen's. They took the handcuffs off me and they put me into Queen's and guarded the doors. So they put me into Van Riet Hall and guarded the doors. I remember the first night I went into prison at 21 years old. I said, if anybody even looks at me wrong, I'm attacking them, right? And this guy came up to me and he said, hey, fish. And I balled up my fists and I walked towards him and I said, did you just call me a fish? And he backs away and goes, whoa, whoa, you're all called fish. And I go, what are you talking about? He goes, haven't you seen you guys when you come into the prison? Handcuffed and shackled together, walking into the dome? We look like fish on a string, right? I have to agree with this definition, right? So here I am in the Queen's. Fish, right? So I'm at Queen's, I get in line with all the other Queen's kids, and I go and I get my gown, and there's a little box with my gown. And I go and sit with all the young, rich, good-looking Queen's kids. And all I can think of is that song from Sesame Street, one of these things is not like the other. And my dad was terminally ill. He got to come and see his son graduate from Queen's before he passed away. And so that God is just incredible with what he gives you, you know. So my dad looking at me, I got up, I complicated. I came down off the stage. I hugged that old professor. He had shaved, not well, by the way. And I hugged him, kissed his scratchy cheek, and told him I loved him. And he whispered in my ear, BA is the kindergarten of learning. Let's start your next degree. So I started in my next degree, and I have another degree from McMaster that lets me work in addiction-specific situations. And I never saw him in the real world. He died. And as I was hugging him, I saw a teacher from Queen's University who would come into the prisons, who did my liaison work. I saw her standing there, and I thought that was huge respect that that woman would come that single mom with 3 little boys would come watch me graduate at Queen's. And I went back to prison and I started my next degree. And the buzz went through prison that Heather Jameson, the teacher that comes in from Queen's University, is quitting. And I went to her office that she had in the school and I said, you know, can I talk to you? And she said, I'll talk to you later. And then after lunch I went to her office and I said, can I talk to you? And she said, I'll talk to you later. And I remember standing and waiting and thinking, well, other guys went in and talked to her. I'm her favorite. She came to see me graduate at Queen's. How come she's not talking to me? And eventually I came into the office at the end of the day, the last person, and I said, what's going to happen to me? Who's going to do my liaison work? Who's going to do my work between the university? And she looked at me and she said, you're a stupid man. And I thought, why is she calling me a stupid man? And she says, I'm quitting to go wait for you. And so she waited 3 years. It's great to be on. She waited 3 years, and here I am, and I came out of prison. Just to let you know how long that was, March 1978 to October 2003. I was 21 when I got in, I was 46 when I got out. All of the disease, everything that was wrong with my body got healed during the last 10 years. Here I am, a Christian, walking where there's no Christian. I had a guy attack me one day. He'd known me 8 years earlier. I'm in a medium security prison, out Bath Institution, and he comes to that prison. He's an enemy of mine from before. He came right off the bus, said, where's Ozzy? Somebody said at the school. He walked right over to me. I'm coming out with books under my arm, and all of a sudden this guy's standing in front of me, and he punches me in the head as hard as he can. I'm a fighter. I slip the punch automatically and knock him out. Now he's laying unconscious on the ground, and I look at him and I go, okay, that wasn't very Christian. Oops, you know. And here come the guards, and they handcuff him and they start taking him away. And I said, whoa, that was my fault. And they said, how was that your fault? We watched him. We watched him on camera. And I said, am I the same guy I was 8 years ago? Oh, no, you're not. And I said, does he know that? And they went, no. And I said, leave him alone. And about a year later, he walked next to me in the yard, and he looked at me and he goes, how are you like this? And so I started telling him about that I'm a Christian and God changed my life. And he said, oh, I knew you were a Christian. That's why I attacked you. And I said, why? And he goes, because Christians are weak. And I said, who told you Christians are weak? He goes, it's in the Bible. And I said, where is it in the Bible? And he goes, there's a verse that says you have to turn the other cheek. And so here I'm in the yard of a medium security federal prison, and I say to him, are you quoting scripture to me? And he stops and he starts laughing. He goes, yeah, I guess I am. And I said, well, I haven't read that part yet. Maybe we can sit down and read that together. And so this was my kind of actions that I had. As I'm getting ready to come out of prison, I have no idea what I'm going to do. Are the Hells Angels going to let me survive? Because now we're all Hells Angels. In 2000, we all patched over in Ontario. Are they going to let me come out and live? And about a year before I got out, I herniated out in the weight pit, but it wasn't a hernia, it was an aneurysm, and I almost died. They raced me to the hospital with shock pants on. One of the bullets that hit me years earlier had touched my artery, and so they'd taken my artery out on my one leg. And now the valve further down had exploded, and so I'm racing to the hospital, and they're painting me orange on the way, and I come into surgery, and the surgeon looks at me and he goes, I want an HIV/AIDS test on that before I touch it. He didn't even call me a human. And so he did this test. I was clean. He operated on me, and then as I came out of surgery and recovery, and I have guards next to me, and I'm handcuffed to this wheelchair, he comes over and stares into my eyes and starts rubbing my shoulder like he's my best friend. And I think, who did he meet during surgery? We know he met the Holy Spirit during surgery. But he looks at me and smiles and he goes, I put an artery in there to have kids. Because I lost that artery, I couldn't have kids, which protected children from me when I was young, because I couldn't have kids and they wouldn't live with me. And so here I am coming out of prison. And that's my daughter, Hannah Grace. And if anybody ever asks me how long I've been out of prison, 17 years. I'm just going to look at how old she is, right? And so I called her Hannah Grace, gift from God, and I came out of prison. And when I came out, I went to the Hells Angels. I went to the national boss of the Hells Angels, and I said, dig a hole, tell me where it is, I'll kneel at the end of the hole, shoot me in the head and kick me in, or leave me alone. And they said, okay, we'll call you when we need you. And it's been 17 years and I haven't got the call yet. And so God just protects. Like, there's no other guy like me. There's no guy who went as deep as I am who came out. And so I came out and I'm just going, you know what? I want to talk to kids. You know what prison's full of? Kids. They're just old. Right? When I became a Christian, I was 36 years old, but I was 14. I was that 14-year-old boy. I never grew after the first trauma happened. And that's what prison is. A bunch of young guys who got hurt when they were young, and now they've aged chronologically, but they're still living in the pain of when they were first hurt. And so I come out and I said, I'm just going to go to schools, I'm going to talk to kids, I'm going to spend time. In 2005, I started my charity, Truth for Teens. The truth will set you free. That's all we've got to give kids, right? I work with, this is not politically correct, I work with angry young men with no fathers. That's what I work with. If somebody says to me, what's the biggest problem out there with youth? Is it drugs? Is it gang? Is it violence? No, it's no father. Right? They don't, instead of being assertive, they're aggressive because they don't know how to be assertive. Right? And so they just need Christian men. I could stand here if there was a board and write the Christian men that made a difference in my life. And by the way, every one of them had white hair. Didn't matter what age I was. Right? And so I just think that older men, wise men, need to spend time with young people. Young people don't, you know, when I go into schools and talk to kids, kids don't listen to 62-year-old men. They listen to scarred up, tattooed 62-year-old men who did 25 years in prison. So God uses anything that's a negative to be a positive. Right? And so I remember here I am, my wife's a vice principal at Newmarket High School. I'm living on Bristol Road. I'm building custom Harleys and custom hot rods, and in the morning I roll them out of onto my driveway and I work on them, and I'm just down from the high school. And one day my wife comes home and she says, how much work do you get done during a day? And I said, not much. And she goes, why? And I said, because I talk to high school kids all day long. And that started my Aussie's Garage, where I would go into high-risk areas, and so I chose northern Quebec to go into isolated communities in northern Quebec, free communities, and build custom Harleys with at-risk youth, and work with the gang activity, and just be a Christian man to them. Because even though in these isolated communities, people are doing evangelism, nobody's standing with them. Discipleship, right? You've got to stand with them, you've got to walk with them. And so I was on the reserve up until 5 years ago. I lived on Auger-Beaujeu, which is Chibougamau and Moose Hunters. Northern Quebec, the road ends, can't go any farther. Right? And so we lived up there, and then I came down here to Font Hill and started Aussie's Garage down here, and I worked with Rich DeBoss. We worked together with young men too. And then I moved to Port Colborne 2 years ago. And when I moved to Port Colborne, my 3.5-bay garage in Font Hill now is an 8x10 shed with a broken down wall in my backyard. Right? How am I going to run Aussie's Garage? Right? And so I'm walking around and I'm going, God, show me a church to take my girls. I have 3 girls. I have Hannah, and I've adopted 2 other girls. So I have 3 teenage daughters. And so I'm walking around, and here's this Anglican church. I've never done Anglican. I'm an old brother in Christ, right? I went to a Catholic church once and didn't know what to do. Kneel, stand. I didn't know what to do. And so here's this Anglican church, and God's telling me to go to this Anglican church. And so I go to this Anglican church with my daughters and my wife, and outside I go, this is church is a building. It's the people inside that make a church. And we go in there, and I want to see the Holy Spirit, and the pastor was incredible. I had goosebumps, you know, this is totally where I need to be. And at the end of the first service, he says, we have a congregational meeting afterwards, because somebody passed away and gave us 3 properties. The empty lots across from the Belmont in St. Catherine, in Port Colborne, the building next to it, and the building in behind. The old snake pit. Mother's old Satan's Choice building. Right? And I went, okay, God, I know what I want to do with it. And so now Aussie's Garage is in the old snake pit. So I'm just in behind Benjamin Moore, at the corner of King and Charlotte. And I work with young men, and we build custom Harleys. And so it's a way for me to interact with them. It's a way for God to work through me in them, right? And by the way, they call me a God guy. I'm a God guy, which I like, right? But it also explains who I am and why I do what I do. I think that's about it. The only thing I want to end with prayer for this church. And I want to tell you that when I got out of prison, you can imagine how damaged I was. My wife had to hold my ID for a couple years. She had to say what I needed to do and who I could talk to and what I could do. I never rode a motorcycle for 5 years because I didn't want to be connected with that world. I wanted that world to forget about me. I couldn't have made it without the church, without these groups of people standing with me and saying, we're not looking at you, we're looking at you, your heart, right? So thank you. And so let me just end in prayer. Lord, thank you for this church body. And thank you for their love. And thank you how they share that with other people. And the power they have through you. Philippians 4:13, I can do all things through you who give me strength. Bless them and bless this congregation. Amen. Thank you.